we need to have a certain capacity for, well, to change LNG to process it in order to transport it. There's no pipeline between Canada and Ecuador, so we would need to transport it on board a ship or something like that.
A plant in place that would be able to transform that liquid natural gas into a transportable subject. Maybe working on it. I'm just not aware of it.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sheehan, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. The Trade Commissioner Services had identified some opportunities that match, with Canadian capabilities and local demand. And you've touched on quite a few of them. The extractive industry, you've covered agriculture as well. But some of the other ones that they had identified, for instance, and I'm interested in this, Sault Ste. Marie is the self-declared alternative energy capital of North America. We don't say alternative energy, we say like clean tech and clean technology or green technology. They have identified clean technology as opportunities. What kind of opportunities in clean technology would they be talking about?
Well, I think what I would say is that Ecuador currently maintains an average tariff rate of 17% on non-agricultural goods. They have broad tariff coverage inside their profile. When you think about a long-term trade relationship, this FTA will provide for basically competitive opportunities in any sector. We don't have a particular clean tech stakeholder group that has stepped forward, but I would say that over a long time horizon, you can imagine this as being a facilitative agreement in any services or goods trade commercial sector.
And it just seems to me that a lot of countries are interested in our technology around, say, small nuclear reactors and things of that nature, where they could be deployed in areas that are, hard to get at, if you will, whether it's up north in Canada or in Japan. There's a real interest in that. Will there be opportunities for that particular industry too to sort of participate in the analysis of the opportunities?
Well, reactors haven't come up as a particular interest, but I would come back to my previous comments and indicate that where demand arises in the commercial relationship, this free trade agreement would support and facilitate expanded trade on a competitive basis.
Services also just talks about infrastructure opportunities. Could you describe what that looks like? What are the opportunities and what are the benefits to Canada and, for that matter, to the country we're trading with, Ecuador?
Sure. Well, to put it in terms of the architecture of the agreement, the trade in goods provisions, the elimination of customs duties on all non-agricultural products is what we're going to be looking for. So that would facilitate the trade in goods. The services and temporary entry for business persons provisions that we will seek would provide for the liberalization and market access commitments on non-discrimination in those areas and facilitate the ability for high-skilled professionals to move more easily between the two. So there's a bit of a value chain aspect to putting together the various provisions of the agreement. But broad sectoral benefits is what we would anticipate within the scale of the relationship.
And if I could just add to that as well, speaking about infrastructure and government procurement, right, is the other piece of that. And I think that's another important chapter for us, broad-based, but certainly within this FTA as well, and to make sure that there are meaningful market access commitments on both reciprocal opportunities on both parties' sides here. So,
and as well, we were talking about the opportunities to improve environmental cooperation. I was thinking of the agreement that the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, the Canadian, had signed with the Ecuadorian government recently, and it's in particular to eradicate the dark vessels that are around the Galapagos Islands. Could you make comments on that and what kind of cooperation that helps foster in your negotiations?
Well, I would describe that agreement as one of the many potential supporting agreements or mechanisms that we have outside of the free trade agreement negotiation itself that would be mutually supportive with the environment chapter that we would plan to negotiate and the cooperation activities that we would undertake under that environment chapter. Like with any trading partner, where we have a free trade agreement, we usually have many, many other bilateral agreements of various natures. And so the dark vessels agreement would be one of those mutually supportive types of treaties alongside a free trade agreement if we were to conclude negotiations and implement.
And I think that, that is extremely important because we have a new president in Ecuador that, again, seems to be progressive in my interpretation and very, very hopeful that we can continue to work together and improve on this planet because the overfishing, especially in the Galapagos Islands and other very sensitive marine areas, really, really can set forth a domino effect of terrible things. So I just wanted to point that out because there are some good indicators of some advancement, if you will, in particular. And I pointed out to the agreements that were signed in May of 2023 around gender. And just there was another one, too, around trade in general about an agreement of trying to improve everyone's lives. Could you make a comment about that one? The name is escaping me right now. I think it's called... Sorry, it escaped me. It was...
The Inclusive Trade Action Group, possibly.
Yeah.
Well, indeed, again, another example of mutually supporting agreements, that in that case, a plurilateral type of initiative, cooperative in nature, but not in any way in conflict with a bilateral free trade agreement, complementary to it. And with regards to the dark vessel agreement, we will pass on your interest to our environment negotiators on the matter of ocean environmental issues. They're watching right now.
Much. So to committee rounds, we have completed 3 rounds. We have a few minutes. Does anyone have a pressing question of our departmental officials? Okay, so does anyone have a pressing question a short one that won't take too long? Mr. Cannings?
Yeah, I would just like to ask someone to expand on this issue of ISDS being unconstitutional in Ecuador, where that stands.
So we've had discussions just in terms of what that what the court has said and so on and so forth, but I'm really not in a position to comment on the Constitution of Ecuador. I'm certainly not an expert in that, but if Ecuador has considerations to share in that regard, we'll look to discuss that at a negotiating table for sure.
Mr. Tremblay?
Je voudrais savoir, on a reçu Amnesty
I would like to know, we received Amnesty International 2 days ago here, and they invited us not to approve an agreement that is carried out without the participation of indigenous populations, especially indigenous women and their organizations, which are quite active. Is there some way in which a process or some process that we could use to ensure this transparency and consultation of indigenous populations down there in Ecuador? In other words, are there any conditions for Ecuador in that regard?
Well, I can only comment on what we have in Canada. We do have an Indigenous working group that we consult with throughout our FTA process, and we will continue to do that. Again, j'ai bien compris la question concernant l'Ecuador.
Oui, c'est ça.
I think I understood the question about Ecuador. In negotiations, there's concerns for human rights and there are conditions that can be imposed. For example, they may say, if you want us to negotiate or sign, then you have to guarantee that it's being done correctly and transparently on your side.
Well, in that regard, we will be engaging with our Ecuadorian colleagues to compare notes on our respective domestic approaches I guess I would just add that we also have supporting programming right now to make a positive impact on the development of the free, prior, and informed consent laws of Ecuador, with a team going down next week, which I'm very heartened by in terms of a supportive initiative.
J'en suis fort heureux dans ce cas.
I'm very glad to hear it then.
A quick question on the investment side. In my previous life, when I was still a student, I think in my economic class, I learned trade follows investment. I don't know if it is still true. We don't have a current foreign investment protection agreement as of now. And the protection that is available to Canadian investments will expire in 2033, if I'm not wrong. So if we don't have a free trade agreement with a dedicated investment chapter and provisions like ISDS, etc., the current investments and any potential investments for Canadian companies going in there, they will have to go in, the new investments have to go in without any sort of protection. So that will create hesitation amongst the Canadian companies to expand into Ecuador. Can you highlight the need for this free trade agreement, in addition to exporting our goods like wheat, etc., why it is required to have a door open for the safe investment of Canadian businesses?
Certainly. So thank you for the question. So first of all, again, to clarify in terms of what the current status is, you're absolutely right that going forward, because the Foreign Investment Protection Agreement we had with Ecuador has been terminated, only investments that were made in and around 2018 are protected until 2033. So anything after that would not be protected by that agreement. And because we don't yet have an agreement where we haven't started negotiations with Ecuador on a free trade agreement with an investment chapter with investor state, there can be no protection for that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. As you can see, the bells have started. We have got a vote call. Thank you very much for all our witnesses. That was very valuable information. We appreciated your patience and all the rest of it. So thank you all very much. Move adjournment.